I'm Brawny and it's game 75 from Brawny's great video games playthrough. It's Soulblade, which you can't really see the artwork on because clearly I bought it at 3 for £10 from GameStation, apparently. Soulblade came out on the PS1 back in 1997 and it was a 3D one-on-one fighter. There's lots of those around. It was mostly unique for having weapons involved, which had only been done in one 3D one-on-one fighter before then, which was Battle Arena to Shinden.
Which I've never played, so don't ask me how it compares because I've got no idea.
Most of the weaponry used in the game tends to be swords, axes. There's a guy with Wolverine style claws. Short range attacks. We're not talking about weaponry with, shotguns or crossbows or laser pistols or anything like that. It's a game very much set in a period of history. It's set around about 1590. Another thing that was pretty unique at the time, as far as I know, with regards to one-on-one fighting games, was there was a ring out system. So if you get knocked out of the fighting arena, then regardless of what your health is like, regardless of how the battle is going, you lose, which is something I always forget until just after it happens to me, at which point I usually swear quite a lot and get really annoyed. From a graphical point of view, it's not an ugly game. It does unfortunately belong to the period of blocky polygons in PlayStation 1 games when everything had to be a 3D game regardless of how simple the graphics would have to look in order for that to be the case. But they do it very well. They've got some nice detailed backgrounds, they avoid complicated textures, the graphics are colourful, the graphics are simple, it's easy to determine between characters and what's going on. I mean, you've got all the usual things that exemplify PS1 games. You've got, as I said, blocky graphics, you've got some weird aliasing effects, transparency, things popping in and out. But by and large, they've clearly stuck with what they know the console can do, and they've refined it and made it look the best that it can do without sort of going too far and incurring other graphical issues down the line or affecting performance or anything like that. So that's all good. There are a couple of stages that look really nice. One in particular is a raft going down a river, so obviously you've got constant movement and things in the background. And that's a nice change from the traditional static backgrounds on a one-on-one fighter, so that brings in a lot of sort of variety and things like that, which is always good. As I said, it's not the world's most beautiful game, but if you stand it next to something like Virtua Fighter, which has sort of, single colour blocky polygons, then it looks much nicer than that. So, and that's all you can ask for really of a 3D game in that sort of era. As with any fighting game, there's a roster of characters you can choose.
There's Huang, who wears that headband like he means business. Rock, not to be confused with The Rock, who is apparently escaping from the mouth of a wild boar. Taki, who wears a mask for reasons. Safita, who is clearly the Pamela Anderson of the lineup. Mitsubishi. Siegfried, who sadly doesn't come with a sidekick called Roy or any white tigers whatsoever. Sungmina, who I don't have anything funny to say about. Li Long, because every fighting game needs an honourable master. Edward Knifey Hands, and Jack Sparrow.
They don't feel very varied. It's not like playing Street Fighter 2 where you've got all the differences between sort of Guile and Dalsim, and you've got obviously Ryu, you've got all the other characters of Street Fighter 2. They all feel individual, they feel like they've been crafted separately. And it feels a lot with Soulblade like they try to make it all about the weapons, but a lot of the weapons are just big swords, so the characters essentially all feel the same. I'm sure all the characters have a massively interesting backstory. However, as my copy of the game has absolutely no manual in it, I can't really tell you because the game itself doesn't tell me, certainly not the arcade mode. So without the manual I obviously can't tell who is good and who is evil, except obviously for Cervantes, because he's a pirate and consequently he's probably an evil douchebag. So with the arcade mode, it's the same old story as any fighting game arcade mode. Pick a fighter, defeat everyone in a random order, and then get the Soulblade. I don't know what happens then. I presume you get to collect your 72 virgins and go and eat a large steak dinner, or if steak is not your thing, maybe you get to go and juggle iguanas while reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I don't really know what happens because I didn't get that far. I mean, I don't know, I didn't get to the end, so in my hour of playing I fought a fair few battles, but if you don't get to the end you don't really get to know what happens. There is a story mode with the wonderful name, the Edge Master mode, which is Well, I don't really know what it does. You load it up, you get some random quotes about fighting, then you get a map, then you get a book with lots of almost unreadable text, and then you just get dropped into a battle that's the same as any other battle that you've had, except it's against a predetermined character and there's clearly some reason for you being there, but I don't know what it is. So I tried it for a bit, but I ended up going back to arcade mode because that's where all the fun is, because you don't have to try and read stuff on a screen where your eyes have to squint to try and make out the 3-pixel high letters. But you don't play a fighting game for the story in the same way you don't go to Burger King to get a salad. You play a fighting game because you want to pummel the crap out of somebody made entirely of polygons, and to do that you need some cracking controls. The controls are responsive, you know, the buttons are in the relevant places, it doesn't feel complicated or hard work to move around and punch somebody. Then you get to about round 3 and discover the computer character has learned how to do special moves. So you pause the game and you bring up the little controller menu that shows you how to do all of the special moves, which starts asking you to do weird combinations that aren't natural, don't feel like, again, I don't want to keep harking on about it, but in comparison with Street Fighter 2 they're much less intuitive than that as combinations. Also, it doesn't differentiate between special moves that are just you know, a chain of 2 or 3 punches in a row and special moves that actually do some serious damage. And the most horrendous error of all, on the list of commands, it gives you commands including buttons A and B. This is a PlayStation controller. There is no A, there is no B, there is a circle, an X, a triangle and a square. So please tell me, which one is A, which one is B, because I don't bloody know, and if I don't bloody know and I'm looking at it on the screen, how is anybody supposed to know? Because I'm playing through these games in a random order on my games playthrough, I have actually already played one of the direct sequels to this game previously in the playthrough. A couple of years ago I played Soul Calibur 2, I'll pop the link in the description below so you can go and have a read of that. And actually I think playing that has tainted my view of this game, because Soul Calibur 2 was better in every way. It's rare you get games where a sequel completely surpasses an original. Normally an original has some kind of charm that the sequel doesn't keep, but then the sequel adds new things that are better than the original, so you normally get a sort of mishmash. But in this case, I mean, everything about Soul Calibur 2 was better than Soulblade has been. If Soulblade was the only fighting game I played, then yeah, I'd probably get it out and play it every so often. I'd get it out to play with a friend. Nothing quite as much fun as beating the crap out of a friend on a video game. But it has been supplanted, not just by Soul Calibur 2 and its own sequels. It's also been supplanted by the sort of the modern era Mortal Kombat's, Injustice, especially if you're a huge comics fan like me, because Injustice was an absolute blast to play. Sadly, this is an instance where retro isn't always better. You'll often hear me go on about retro games being better than their modern counterparts. Platformers are a good example of this. But with fighting games, maybe it's because they only really came to prominence in the mid-90s, so they hadn't had the sort of 10-year evolution that other gaming genres had had. But when you go back to an early 3D fighter now, especially when I've gone back to Soulblade today, it just feels incomplete. It feels like it's not the gaming experience you remember it being. It's not the gaming experience you want it to be. It's not without its charms. The opening FMV cinematic is beautiful for that era. It won awards at the time. It's continually referred to by sort of people as one of the greater game videos of that era, and it does look spectacular. It's a shame the rest of the game is not as spectacular as its opening cinematic, really. I mean, for me, this is a definitive average game. I don't regret the fact I own it. I enjoy playing it. I'm unlikely to pick it up and put it in the console again. If I want to go play a fighting game, I've got plenty of others in the collection that I enjoy more than this one. So my advice would be, don't play it. Play something else instead. Play a more modern fighting game or one of the Soul Calibur series instead of Soulblade, because the mechanics have been refined and it just feels more fun. So I think you're just going to sit round about a 5 out of 10 for me, Soulblade.